It's probably no surprise to you if you're subscribed to this channel that I am an eternal optimist, and I wear that as a badge of honor. I'm not going to lie, but even I can't look past some of the negative news coming out of Santa Clara recently, and I'm going to do my best to leave you feeling positive, but 49ers faithful, we have to go a little bit over to the dark side. In today's video, I'm going to tell you what bad news we have gotten. There are several pieces, and how I think the 49ers overcome it this season. If you're new here, my name is Nate, and I'm talking with you every single day about the San Francisco 49ers, and it really does help me out if you hit that subscribe button. Well, I've got 3-ish stories here that are fairly negative, or at least are perceived by most people to be considered negative things. Let's get into them, starting off with, my 12-5 prediction. Well, I'm just going to say I did have to move to a 12-5 prediction recently as this news came out. The news about the rest differential is not new. This has been out since Thursday of last week. You've probably already heard about this or seen it, but the news, and I'll go quick since you probably already know about it, but the news isn't great. Obviously, the San Francisco 49ers have the worst rest differential, and among the worst since 2002, which is a pretty good chunk of time, and that's a bummer, right? Not great. And also to see guys like the Baltimore Ravens, who are a top 10 team, up there getting this incredible benefit in terms of rest. Seems like an unfair advantage here and an unfair disadvantage down here. Understood, obviously schedules are complicated, but man, that's a bummer. And here are the 49ers top 3 in worst rest differential since 2002. That's this blue bar right here. But last year, 49ers, what would that be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7th worst just last year, and look what they did. So yeah, it's bad news. It's for sure bad news. It's a downside. But I will say on the positive, they went through this before. And I do think there's so much in the NFL that just changes from week to week. It's really hard to actually turn any of this into concrete anything. It's just data. That's all it is. But as you can see here, the 49ers, the only team this season going up with 4 against 4 teams that are coming off bye weeks. That's not ideal. I'll give the one caveat that the Kansas City Chiefs are coming off a bye week, but we're coming off of that Thursday night game. So they still have a decent benefit there in terms of a rest benefit, but unfair rest benefit, I guess you could say. But, we're not that far off. Not that, at least that week we have a little extra rest to prepare for that game. And maybe in some ways that could be better. Depends on the situation. Some coaches are not great at the game that follows the bye week. So we'll have to see how other coaches fare, but, I'm confident in ours. Some other notable teams here. Obviously, all of our division rivals are in there, and then some other notable solid teams are on there, of course, too, with only having 2 or 1 week of rest differential, which is crazy, 1 week facing somebody coming off a bye week. The Kansas City Chiefs win the Super Bowl. We have a harder schedule than them. And on top of that, they're also only playing 1 team coming off of a full week of rest, which is pretty crazy to me. Obviously, one of those being the Rams, of course. And then you've got some big name teams down here that aren't facing any teams coming off of bye week, which seems lucky for them, I suppose. But as we're thinking about it again, saw this on Reddit, love it. 49ers have the worst net rest differential in the NFL for the second straight year. But let's remember, the second straight year, which means we've faced this before. This is not entirely new for this team. This is something that they've gone through and can go through again. They'll have a plan for it. So I'm going to stay positive on that particular one. Some other news that we do need to talk about here came out this morning. And I've got videos popping up on my screen I have to hide from you, otherwise copyright. Aiyuk, 49ers not close in contract negotiation, just posted earlier today. Brandon Aiyuk contract extension does not seem to be on the horizon for the 49ers, at least not yet. Aiyuk and the 49ers have not made much progress, and an agreement is not close. ESPN Jeremy Fowler reported Sunday on SportsCenter. This one's tricky because he was implicated in some trade talks around the draft. He wants a new contract, has 1 year left. I'm told the 49ers certainly are open to doing a deal, but talks have not progressed enough where things are close. And so, is he going to show up for their workouts? Hard to tell right now. The market is pretty set for him. Brown from St. Brown in Detroit did that deal recently, around $28 million per year. So that's something for Aiyuk and the 49ers to work off of, but I'm told they're not quite there yet. So yeah, that's not an ideal situation. If history is an indicator, it's that San Francisco and Aiyuk could continue negotiating a contract extension well into the summer and possibly even into training camp. And look, the bad news on this, obviously, you'd like to have that deal done. You want this team to be as strong as they can going into this season. Unfortunately, some of the downsides of these contracts going late into the summer is if Aiyuk ends up missing out on training camp or OTAs, if there ends up being beef in the locker room, if there can be negative side effects to these types of situations. And I understand why lawyers advise their players to do what they do. I understand why players decide to do what they do, but it can have some negative implications. And we're hoping that the deal gets done sooner rather than later so that everybody can move forward with this upcoming season, all positive, all focused. I think that would be an ideal situation. But what do you think that they should do? Question of the day today. Should the 49ers pay him big? Should they give him a number and hold out and let him sit and rest on it and see what happens? Or should they lowball him and let him walk? I'm not sure how many people are saying lowball him and let him walk, but that's technically an option that the 49ers could do. I don't think they will, but they could. My main concern with not paying Aiyuk personally is that the team at times had to rely very heavily on Deebo Samuel being that main target guy. And yes, there were moments where Juwan Jennings gets out there and makes some great catches and stuff. I'm not trying to act like, Deebo's the only guy left on the roster who can catch a football, but I certainly like the situation better when you've got two guys who are solid in catching in coverage. If you have two guys on your team who are targets that could be in triple coverage, and if you thread the needle, which Purdy did so many times last season, if you thread the needle, they will catch that ball. Then that's a win for you, obviously. We want to have both of those guys. I don't think we're number one wide receiving group if we don't have both of those guys coming into this season. That being said, we'll see what happens. You never know. I'm feeling positive that they'll get a deal done. There is questions about what will happen with Deebo next year. I think you got to just kind of focus on one thing at a time in this one season in front of us right now. And if we can get Aiyuk on the roster for this season and paid, that would be a much better scenario in my mind. All right, and then finally, the story number three that a lot of folks are pretty down about is this language going around of last dance. There's a lot of negativity with the idea of this being the last dance for the 49ers. In some ways, it's practical. Like, this is just the reality. We're looking at it, and it looks like it's probably going to be the last big push for this particular roster to go and try and win a Super Bowl. And I'm going to talk about the positives on the other end, but here are some of the reasons that are completely fair as to why the situation is playing out this way. Roster turnover is inevitable. Some of the 49ers' top end players are aging, plus the league catches up, and the NFL is the ultimate league of parity. Couldn't agree more with all of those statements. Very few teams find themselves in the Super Bowl multiple years in a short time. Injuries play a role in a run to the big game at times. Luck certainly plays a role in any team's road to the Lombardi. All of those things are completely fair things that play into this potentially being the last run with this current roster heading to the Super Bowl. Steve Young outlined how last season the 49ers it was their perfect opportunity. This happened last week. You might have missed it, to bring home the team's 6th Super Bowl ring, but he is optimistic as well about the long-term outlook for the team. The really great organizations, the window never actually closes. It can narrow and then widen and narrow. As we talked about the other day, if you want these names to win the Super Bowl, then it's a limited window. And it's narrowing and narrowing quickly because you've got to pay Brock, so it's going to change. The jerseys you're wearing today that you love are not the jerseys of the players if you're going to win a Super Bowl 2 or 3 years from now. And that makes perfect sense. His point is very simple. If this exact roster right here, you want to win the Super Bowl with that group, with that crop, with that talent, that opportunity is right now. And that is when people say it's the last dance, that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about the last dance like, I don't know, Michael Jordan, which is where that phrase is most popularized, at least in recent years, where the guy's retiring and they're moving on. This is not the Denver Broncos in 2015. Peyton Manning wins a Super Bowl, walks off and sails off, or what would be rides the horse off into the sunset, right? Rides the Bronco off in the sunset. This is not that kind of last dance scenario where you're just picking up the pieces for years to come, hoping that you can put something together someday and become a playoff contender again, right? This is a different kind of last dance because you have your guy. You still have Brock Purdy, and you still have other great targets, even if you end up losing a couple guys. No, we don't have a Trent Williams replacement, and if he retires at the end of the season, then there's a problem to solve there for sure. And yes, Fred Warner is aging. There are other guys out there that are aging for sure, but that's why you bring in great talent. That's why you draft. That's why great organizations solve it. I think the 49ers are a great organization. This isn't a last dance season for the 49ers in their future, but it feels like it may be for the current 49ers roster. The key to sustaining success is with their recent draft class. It's the nature of the NFL, and unfortunately will force the 49ers to make some tough decisions with the roster. Hey, look, I hope that you're feeling, even through the negative, even through the downside, even through the bad news that I had to share there, I hope you're feeling positive like I am. I do think there are some tough hurdles that the 49ers are going to have to climb in this year and upcoming seasons, but I'm feeling optimistic that they're going to handle it and we're going to stay relevant. Let me know what you think in the comments, though. Feel free to disagree with me. As always, I'm feeling optimistic. What a time to be alive.